That's very important. Let's shift gears.
Sure.
I hear a lot about, so I mean, we see it everywhere. I don't think any company is safe from this, even outside of sales. Micromanaging. I think, people feel they're micromanaged, they're not really.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's real micromanagement. Sometimes there are methodologies that are applied that aren't really micromanagement, but come off like it. What are your thoughts on micromanagement and maybe any guidance on anyone who feels they're being micromanaged?
It's an interesting one. So I think in all things in life, the communication is key. And you gotta get comfortable having tough conversations. So you got to be able to go back to, like, if you're feeling you're being micromanaged and those things are happening, you need to be able to communicate back to the person you're feeling micromanaged by. And because there's, again, we'll go back to perspective and a lot of these recurring themes, but you don't know why, where, like, what are they trying to go do? What are they trying to go achieve? And they might be thinking about you in a category and a thing, and it might not really apply to you, and they don't understand those things as well. So communication is a two-way street. You can be the world's greatest communicator, but if you don't have someone on the side who's going to be a communicator as well, like, it just will never work. So communication is a two-way street, but then you need, no matter what, you need to say, hey, you got to go communicate back to that person and to people. So micromanagement at times, I really falls under me and under the busy work stuff. It falls into somebody who doesn't trust their team, who believes, like, there's a lot of people who are like process oriented. They love process. Like, it's their jam. Like, that's what they love. They get it. They're like, oh, you got to go do these documentations and do all these things. They're like, oh, we're going to do this. And, like, you're like, okay, but is this really helpful? Is this really going to help me go do my job? And I think where those people fall short at times is they don't put themselves in that person's shoes. They think about it from their side, and they think about it for, like, well, this is what I got to go do, and I got to go get you, like, hey, X, I got to go make you better. Okay. But is that really the right way to go do it? I think I just went through a great training on situational leadership, right? And situational leadership will kind of pull you away from micromanagement in the sense of, you got to understand who the person is, what's the dynamic. We're all different. And I think that's the toughest thing about management, is when you get into it, is you think, like, things that don't matter to you matter to other folks. Okay. How do you do those things? How do you make sure they have the things they need when you're like, I don't care, I don't need that, right? And so you got to work through all of those things. And I think a lot of times micromanagers are on top of everyone. They don't give people the freedom to go do their job, and they bury them with busy work versus actually helping take away obstacles for them to go do their jobs.
Totally get it. I mean, I think, where I was, the last place where I was a sales leader and I ran a team, they were, as a culture, they were just very big on inspection.
Sure.
Like, it was super big on inspection. That word must have been used several, like, I heard it all the time. And as a leader, I'm like, okay, what's that going to look like to my reps, to my team? It sure as hell is going to feel like micromanagement. Sure. Like, and then you remove that layer of trust that maybe you had. Like, I know that when my manager comes to me and says, hey, give me, do this for me. Have you done this? I'm like, looking up as if he's
yeah, right.
Like, did you not think I would do that? Do you not trust me to do that? But I mean, we have great rapport, so he can be open with me. I'm playing with Luke, my dog's down here. Yo, what's up? Okay, yeah, there we go. And we've got great rapport enough for him to tell me, like, he's like, honestly, he's like, I'm on a call with my boss, and I just needed something real quick. It's not that he was micromanaging me.
Right.
But that goes back to your point of communication. Like, we at least communicated that, and I totally get it. I was like, yep, here you go. Here's what you need. And I'm not micromanaged. Sometimes the perception is not reality.
Right.
And likewise, my team, there's a difference between inspection and I think that goes to an office culture where you need to inspect because you're standardizing across the board. You're trying to implement a process, right? Like, this is how things get done. And if they don't do this, then they're not doing their job. Well, there's extenuating circumstances, and there's different, to your point, there's different reps and different people who operate differently.
Mm-hmm.
That's just innate. Shout out to Dave Eagle. He has a famous phrase. He's like, Dave, like when people ask him, what's your management style? And he says, management style? Oh, I've got 12 of them.
Right.
Like, what do you mean? Well, I've got 12 reps, so I've got 12
right.
styles.
That's right.
Like, and that goes, I guess it's called situational leadership.
Yeah.
And I think, Paul and I go back and forth on that. He knows that. So that's a sign of a great leader. He's like, look, I get it. You need something very different from me.
Yeah.
Than I need, than anyone else on your team that needs me for. But I don't think we would have gotten there if I didn't, to your point, if I didn't communicate that up front, if he didn't get like, I told him, remember the first conversation we had, I was like, dude, here's what you can expect of me. And here's where I'm going to need you.
Yep.
And it's going to vary from person to person.
It is. And I think, again, perceptions are always a powerful thing, but I think, so that inspection that people are doing might be really important for the business. But if the leaders didn't communicate that to people, and it's always on them to communicate so that somebody else understands, right? So it's a sales rep. If I communicate something to my customer, my prospect wasn't an idiot, I did a bad job of communicating to them. And it's, same thing from that. For the leadership, they say, well, this is really important. Like, okay, maybe people aren't doing it because they don't understand why it's important and how does that tie back to the business. I mean, there in reality in life is hopefully most people have seen the movie Office Space. If you haven't, it's a great movie. But it's, the TPS reports. There will always be aspects of life that have TPS reports, and okay, but don't make a mountain out of a molehill either. Like don't go down with the ship because of that one thing is the most infuriating thing. Like it's not worth it. Like perspective, again, powerful thing. But however, if a leadership's asking you to do something, you should at least understand why it ties back to the business and where they need help with. And if you don't, ask. Say, okay, but help me understand. Like this is really time consuming for me. Why do you need this? I don't see the value. And they should be able to tell you. If they can't, then they should probably ask themselves, do I really need you to do this?
Communication. Yes. There's a reason for everything. Right. Like very rare would be the case that a leader would ask you, hey, do this. And it's just, they just felt like giving you work. Like what, like there might be a reason. And it, you know what? It may even be a misunderstood reason or maybe even the wrong reason.
Right.
But then you can talk through it. Hey man, we've had a great talk. But I'm gonna end it on the same way I'm gonna end all these. But if anybody were to ask you, Nick Degnan, like there's one thing that I could focus on, or one thing that will lead me to success in a career in sales, what would that be?
I mean, I guess I struggle with one thing, so I'm going to do it, but it's going to go back to one thing we talked about earlier, but it's really going to be curious and put the work in. Like those are the things. Like that's it. You got to want to know, want to understand. You got to understand your people. You got to understand your customers. You got to understand the business problems you're going through. You got to understand the different dynamics they live through, and you got to understand all of those things. But you got to be curious about all those things. You got to want to know and want to understand. How are you ever going to learn about your technology and understand if your technology really is the best thing for the customer unless you're curious about that? Challenge yourself, grow, ask questions constantly. Little kids ask why, right? Same thing. Ask yourself that time, why am I doing this? Is this the right thing for me to do? What's going on here? Is there a better way to go do this? Could I do something better? I've been doing this for 20 years. Is there something else I could be doing? What's like all of those things? Be curious about it and then put the hard work in and you'll have a great career.
Hard work, not busy.
Not busy.
Love it. I love it. No, it's perfect, man. Yeah. When, you're saying be curious, I think that's another one also that I want to double click on it.
Sure.
It's another one that gets lost in just as almost like a euphemism. People just say it.
Sure.
And it's not really like, what do you mean be curious? Like, how can you teach someone to be genuinely curious? Because it is a genuine curiosity. Yeah. It's less like making yourself curious, but I think it comes with time and wouldn't you say you have to have a certain degree of, like, you have to want to know,
Right.
right?
That's what
Like,
I'm saying.
you have to want to know why, whether it's your client, whether it's your leadership, and like why certain things are happening, and then take the initiative to ask those questions. But I think you can't, if you don't have that desire, and maybe this isn't for you.
Right. And which is, by the way, is an okay thing. People love the paycheck of sales. But it's not many careers that you can have that, 1 minute you can be the greatest in the whole time, and then the next minute you can be the worst of all time. Right. It's like the highs and the lows and everything else in between. And that people see, they see a lot of those things out there. And I'll use my last sports analogy, but Steph Curry, they don't see, like, I think it's something like an hour and a half he practices before the games, the shots, the work he does. They don't see that. If people saw the big deals I did, people didn't see all the work I did to get to that point.
Oof.
Like my brother is been wildly successful and he, lucky in so many ways, but also people don't see the risk and the work he did. They just saw the outcome in the end. And so you think about all those things, man. It's like, you got to go do those things, and people don't see all those other parts of it there. And if you don't do those parts of it and you don't really want to know, you're going to struggle. And back to your point, there's no shame in saying, hey, sales ain't for me. It's okay. It's a great skill set, but maybe something else is there for you. The worst thing you'll ever do is chase a job for money. You'll never be happy.
Spot on, man. Yeah, I think that's the unseen, the dark side. It's not even dark. It's just the side of sales success you don't see. I mentioned it during my last conversation. There were nights I stayed extremely late. I would eat the food that the vendors brought in.
Right.
It's not because I was like, oh, look at me. Like, hopefully they notice me. I had work to do.
Right.
And then, this happens throughout anyone's career, but then I experienced success, and people immediately look to me like, oh, he was given this, or oh, right. He, it's because of his relationship with the leadership. They just like him, and I got a fair share of that in my career. And to your point, it's tough to see, like, you didn't see the work that I put in,
right?
And even this last year, you just scared me, like. I need, like, it's healthy paranoia. I think Mark Cuban calls it, right? Mark Cuban,
right?
You gotta have that anxiety of, okay, well, I was number one, but not number one anymore. Like, I've got this year to conquer,
right?
And what's that going to look like? And I've got to put in the hours. So,
if you're not, somebody else is, right? So.
Oh yeah. It's a big Arnold quote. The wolf at the top is not as hungry as the wolf climbing the mountain.
I mean, that's what happens. And I tell you what I look for in sales professionals is I look for people who are hungry, and they're hungry at every level, because there's a lot of people who get very complacent along the way. And if you're curious, you're going to be hungry, you're going to work hard, you're going to do those things in there, probably going to be pretty successful. And you can't fake anything in life. If you fake it, it's never going to come through.
I think that goes, I know we were towards the end, but
yeah,
you brought up something important. That also goes, though, it's something very critical that comes up in sales. Like, you'll find reps that they'll prospect and they'll find a deal, and then they're like, yes, and they'll cling to it. But then what happens? They just stop prospecting. Like, they just work on that one deal, and they're like, all right, I got my meeting done. I'm gonna go have fun with my friends, or I'm gonna go out. Okay, well,
go golfing, yeah, whatever.
Right. What if that deal goes away, and then most of the time it does? What's next? Somebody made a comment to me. They're like, look at your pipeline. Didn't you just close all these? I'm like, yeah. Right. Like, what do you think? I was just sitting back, like, all right, I'm good, vacation, and like, but that, to your point, like, earlier, like, it's you don't just learn that day one. It's through years of going through it, being in the trenches, having those sales scars. I've been there where I closed a lot of it and then I just had nothing left. I'm like, oh, What?
Right.
What now?
I mean, right. I think like one of my favorite sayings in life is you're never as good as your territory, you're never as bad as your territory. But I think you go back to like, I also see so many times that, things you can run the best sales campaign of your life and that deal falls apart for something outside of your control. You can run the worst sales campaign and get the deal, but it's like, but if you don't put that work in, you might have that one time wonder or whatever it is, or you're like, oh, their quota is too high, or they're jacking me this way. It's always somebody else, right? We talk about accountability, we talk about all these things. It's up to you. Your accountability and how you do stuff. And there's a great study about, do you return the shopping cart back to where it's supposed to go, or do you just leave it next to the car? And basically what it's saying is, how do you act when people aren't there?
Aren't there, right?
When no one else is looking. Are you accountable to yourself?
That's integrity.
Yeah. Are you honest with yourself? Because that's the toughest thing. People lie to themselves all the time. Like, oh, you know what? I deserve this vacation. I deserve these nice shoes. I deserve this nice car. I deserve what I did. The biggest deal I ever closed. You know what I did the next day? I closed it on a Saturday. That Sunday, for the first time after I bought my house, I mowed my lawn for the first time with a 20-year-old lawnmower that I got a hand-me-down from my brother that he hadn't probably used in 10 years. I had a drink. I celebrated with my wife. We had a nice dinner. We didn't go out do anything fancy. Like, it's you do you, but I think it's like you got to enjoy a moment because you got to enjoy life because you can't let it get away from you. People get too far. And another thing I'll quickly say is, it's never about, don't ever compare yourself to somebody else. Your journey is your journey. Yeah. Compete against people, be competitive, be driven, get after it. But don't ever, like, there's people who are god awful at their jobs and make a lot of money. There's people who are really good at their jobs and don't make a lot of money. There's a lot of things else in between that happen. Don't ever compare yourself in your journey to anyone else's. So just do that. Work hard, be curious, get after it, have integrity. Do those things out there. And it's amazing. You're going to wake up one day and be like, oh my God, I have a pipeline after I just closed my year, right? After I just finished an inaugural year in this new business segment that we were just trying to figure everything else out there. X finishes as a top rep, right? And did you stop? No, you kept going. Larry Bird, my basketball idol growing up, it was a famous conversation of him. He got called the next day after they won the NBA championship, and somebody's calling the house like, "Hey, where's Larry?" They're like super excited and having a great time. He's out there running. It's you, buddy. It's what you're doing, and that's all those things show through, and people don't always see it, but it shows up when it matters.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. It's something that's learned. It's something that's within someone. I like the 48-hour rule. I don't even know if it's a real thing, but 48 hours, whether you win or lose, okay, like
that's right.
48 hours, enjoy it, but you're right back in the saddle.
That's right.
As if it never happened. You forgot about it. It's great for big losses and great for big wins, just to keep you. Of course, Shayla would like it to be like entire month maybe, but
right.
That's another conversation for work-life balance. Nick, thank you so much. Nick Degnan, one of the great sales leaders I've met more recently in my career. So I appreciate you doing this, man. We'll be doing more of these. Coming up will be actually a curveball. I'll be interviewing a customer, a client, whom I've known for some time, and so we'll see if we can get that perspective. Yeah, man. But everybody out there, like, subscribe. What did the YouTubers say? Like, share, ring the bell. I don't know, all that stuff. It'll get better. Technology will get better. I'll get a microphone. Maybe get some better lighting. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see where this goes. Man.
It's great. Thank you for having me. And thank you, Xavier. And I think, I love that you're doing this, and I love everything you bring to the business. And thank you for letting me be part of your journey and working with you, man. It's awesome.
Yeah, man. Appreciate you as well.
All right.
We'll talk.
All right.
Love
Cheers.
you. Bye.